What's up guys, Aroneous here with another Raid Shadow Legends video, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about Tainted Hellraiser and a bunch of different champions, at least 5 to 10 champions that you could utilize to help take down this new upcoming boss in the future. So let's first start off by watching the brief clip of Tainted Hellraiser, so maybe we can catch a few things that we didn't catch prior, because sometimes watching things over helps re-jog our memory, and then we might catch things that we didn't catch in the past that it was previously said. So let's go over there and watch that brief clip right now.
Bring your A game. Let's start with the noxious dragon. It's Tainted Hellraiser. Rather than more fire, this malevolent fiend has doubled down on horrific poisons.
Extra poison damage.
Fire skill will apply twice as many poison debuffs as its normal counterpart, Wall of Fire, and it beefs up Tainted Hellraiser with a 50% increase attack buff for good measure. Also, his secret skill, Toxic Incineration, will activate all poison debuffs on your champions at once.
Interesting.
This caustic explosion can deal major damage, so be sure to bring someone who can cleanse these poisons from your team. Now,
all right, so let's go back and talk about and discuss the Tainted Hellraiser and a bunch of different champions that you can still utilize to be able to beat that dragon. All right, so you heard that the gentleman that was speaking in the background, he did mention that the Tainted Hellraiser dragon, he's going to have an increase in attack by 50%, so he is going to put an increased attack buff on himself. He's also going to deal a ton of damage with poison explosion on your team, so you have to bring people in with high resistance. As you saw in the video clip, Duchess was resisting, so that means that your champions could potentially resist the poisons and all the debuffs that that dragon throws onto you. So I'm assuming that the new dungeons are going to have a much higher threshold when it comes to having high resistance on your team. So you got to be very careful and bring in people that can not only just cleanse if you don't have high resistance, but just in general, you need to have fast, speedy champions too. But this boss seems very easy compared to the other two bosses that I went over in my previous videos. And if you haven't seen them, please go ahead and check them out. Tainted Crisis and then Tainted Pyro as well. So in regards to champions that you could utilize, I mean, right off the bat, Arbiter. Arbiter's going to speed up your champions. She's going to bring in a revive. She's going to bring in increase speed as well with a heal if you're under half health. Of course, the champion that was showcased there was Duchess. You can bring in a Duchess. I personally have a Duchess. This is my free-to-play account. Pulled Duchess a little while back now. Probably I think I've had her for like 3 or 4 months now. So she's a really, really strong champion. Of course, if you get Mithrala, you could definitely build Mithrala with high resistance very easily. She's also an amazing, amazing cleansing champion. And when she cleanses, she does put on the strengthen and shield buff on your team. And it's on a 3-turn cooldown if you can book it out. I am working on booking her out, but of course, all my books ended up landing in the A1 and the A2 when I really wanted the A3 booked out. But it is what it is. Plus, she has high accuracy in all battles as well. Now, you have to remember, these dungeons are more focused on late game to end game content. So if you're an early game player and you get to level 50, don't focus your entire time and energy and resources on trying to farm and make teams surrounding a hard dungeon when you might not even have the gear equipped to deal with the dungeon. So if you're an early game player, don't focus on hard dungeons right away. Focus on faction wars. Focus on your regular dungeons. If you can't even beat stage 25 of your regular dungeons, there's no reason why you should be focusing on the hard dungeons. So do not get upset if you're having struggles with the hard dungeons. All right, let's go and focus on a couple other champions you can utilize. Well, quite a few champions you can utilize to beat this boss. Of course, just to mention, Mithrala's skill, she has poisons as well. They didn't mention anything about the boss having reduced damage to the poisons in the video, so I'm assuming that poisons are still going to work, unless for some reason I wasn't listening and things went right over my head watching that clip. You can leave it in the comments down below though. Another champion you could of course use is gonna be Ninja. With these stronger dungeon bosses, they're gonna scale way higher, and then Ninja scales really well while he's attacking, especially with his passive ability. But a lot of people aren't going to have Ninja at this point, so I'm not even really going to talk about him too much. And then, of course, you could potentially bring in unkillable teams against these new bosses. They didn't say anything about the bosses ignoring unkillable or block damage. So it's a possibility that you could bring unkillable teams into these new hard dungeon bosses if you really need it, right? So if you put in the unkillable, especially with a Maneater, you're going to bring in people that want to be able to put the block debuffs buff, right? So Maneater actually is a little bit better than Sir Nicholas against this wave or this hard dungeon boss, because Maneater places the unkillable but also the block debuffs for 2 turns. Now it is on a 5-turn cooldown as compared to Sir Nicholas's 4-turn cooldown. Sir Nicholas does bring in more healing for the team for support, but he also brings in shields, so I guess it depends. If the dragon boss hits a lot of damage against your team, then maybe the shields are actually going to be super beneficial for you as a player. So another person you could bring in, of course, is Lydia if you've completed the faction wars, right? Because Lydia can help with the poison sensitivity, decreased defense weaken, strengthen buff, that's huge, so you can take less damage, especially if he has the increased attack on himself. You could also bring in a champion that does remove the debuff, the buffs, right? So if you have a champion that can remove buffs from your enemies, that's going to be helpful. Someone that came straight to mind. He's going to be the most impactful epic in the game. I'm pretty sure, bar none. Geomancer. He's going to be probably the most impactful epic for all hard dungeon bosses. Unless they somehow mitigate his passive, you can just bring him in to this dungeon boss as well. The same for the Pyro boss, or not the Pyro, the Clysis boss. So he's going to remove the buffs from the target enemy, then attacks them. Okay? He's going to place the Quicksand Grasp, HP Burn, and Weaken on the Fire, the dungeon boss for the dragon. And then the dragon's going to do a lot of damage on ourselves, which then damage reflected back to him. So again, Geomancer is going to be ridiculous. Jareg, going to be super good too, right? Because he's going to help with ally protection. If you build him with really high HP, especially when he has ally HP in all battles, he can do exceptionally well, especially in a stalwart set like I have him in. You're definitely going to need at least 400 plus accuracy, I'm sure. You probably are going to end up needing 600 accuracy. I'm assuming they're going to try to scale these hard dungeons similar to the way they scaled Iron Twins. So I'm going to assume that you need at least a minimum of 600 accuracy on the highest stages of hard dungeons. So just kind of shoot for that mark, because at the end of the day, you really should be focusing on trying to get your endgame champions to the thresholds of Iron Twins and late game hard Doom Tower to begin with, right? Because all content in the future is going to be scaling extremely high. So you shouldn't be having champions in like 230 accuracy when you're dealing with hard dungeons. At that point, yes, it's overkill for regular dungeons, but that just means your regular dungeons are just going to have a faster time to beat them, right? For the hard dungeons, you want to have as fast of a time as possible, which means you need the best gear possible. So if you're a newer player, you're just coming and watching this might be a little bit too much for you at this point, and this video just doesn't even make sense to you possibly. But at the end of the day, you need to start working on scaling up your gear and reworking how much gear you have on your account. If you have 4-star gear, but you have tons of 5-star gear, just get rid of your 4-star gear. You don't even need it. Keep all your 5-star good gear, right? And watch videos of people that post about gear cleansing, what gear to keep, what gear you should be focusing on, things like that, especially for the new dungeons coming out. Now, other champions you could utilize potentially, Miscreated I don't think would be amazing against the dragon, but you could bring in people like Husk who could deal with enemy max HP, right? Enemy max HP damage is huge. You could also bring in Coldheart still, as long as her stats are good enough to survive hits. So you can bring in a Coldheart or two if you needed to. She's still going to work just fine. I'm sure it's going to be a 10% cap, similar to the dungeons we already have, but we don't know too much more than what we just watched in the video. You could also bring in a Vogoth. Vogoth's going to be very helpful. He's going to help with the increase in duration of the debuffs on the dragon, and also when he hits really hard on us, we end up healing our team, right, based on his passive. Okay, it's this passive here. Whenever attack, this champion heals all allies by 50% of the damage received. So not a bad champion there as well. Of course, you could also bring in Deacon Armstrong if you're struggling and you're a low spend or a free-to-play player like myself. You can bring in Deacon Armstrong, put him with high speeds, build him really, really, really fast, and then build him with high accuracy, build him with better HP, of course, better defense. I would honestly consider scaling your defense 3,000 defense or more, and your HP at least like 60,000 HP or more for the new dungeons that are going to come out before I even see what the actual stats are. Because at the end of the day, you want to scale your champions up higher and higher and higher. You don't want to just remain at the same spot that you're at. You need to continuously grow your champions and change out the gear as needed. So especially as you progress and new content comes into the game. Other champions, of course, rare champions are not going to be as beneficial anymore on your account as compared to legendary champions or epic champions. Like Kale, I mean, he's just going to be very hard to build compared to other champions, right? But of course, you're talking hard dungeons again. You could bring in a Kale, possibly, but again, he has a lot lower stats. He's probably going to die faster. You could bring in Apothecary. Again, he has lower stats, but he's pretty fast. It's just one option you could potentially use. He doesn't need any accuracy. He's just there for support and survivability. You're going to want to bring in legendary champions. By the time you're working on hard dungeons like this new Hellraiser boss, you're going to have at least 5 to 10 legendary champions on your account. So you need to be focusing on what you can utilize. Now, of course, other champions you should be bringing in is going to be poison champions. Like Dracomorph is insane. Theodore is insane. All these like solo artist champions that could probably end up, soloing like Tomb Lord, Bad El Khazar. I'm probably just going to be using Bad El Khazar still. So like my Bad El Khazar, I recently redid his gear, so he has a little bit more defense. Now I need him to have more speed and more HP, and I'm assuming that all you're going to need to do is have more HP, more speed, more resistance, and then maybe a little bit more accuracy for the new hard dungeons. But I feel like Bad El Khazar for me is going to work just fine. I just need to get more HP, which means I would need better gear, even though all of this gear is 6-star besides this one ring. I would need to get better 6-star gear, which means epic legendary 6-star gear by continuously farming Fire Knight in regular dungeons. That's what I said. If you're not doing very well in hard dungeons, which you shouldn't even be focusing on that to begin with, unless you're late to end game, then you should be focusing on stages 20 to 25 of the dungeons. Work on getting your gear to be a lot better than it is. Like this piece isn't even that good, right? So I would want to focus on upgrading his gear. So I want to eventually get Bad El Khazar to like 85,000 HP, 3,000 to 4,000 defense, 240 speed to 250 speed, right? Resistance, I want to get it to like 400 to 450 resistance. Accuracy, I want to get it to like 350 to 400 accuracy. So at the end of the day, you need to continuously progress your account. Unfortunately, you need to remove gear, which costs silver. Again, silver is the worst thing in this game, I think, but you just need to do it. So other champions, obviously Duchess. You could potentially use Mashald, but that's going to be for like the waves. You could bring in a Lysandra to help you with speeding up your team. Another person you could potentially bring in is a Martyr with the counterattacks. You can bring in counterattack champions just in general. I do also feel like the Lightning Offer, no, thanks, free to play. I do also believe that you can bring in reflect damage champions for some, especially the Pyro boss. You could bring in reflect damage champions now, potentially. If they're going to do a lot of damage to you, then maybe reflect damage champions actually have a spot in the game potentially now. I don't know for sure, but reflect damage, ally attackers, counter attackers, a lot of poison for this boss, Hellraiser. And then you could bring in like Ultimate Death Knight, obviously is really good just in general, but the thing with Ultimate Death Knight is unless the boss is attacking a single target, his passive is not going to work. Pythion's going to be top tier. Python is going to be insane because he has that cleanse and a full revive. Cleanse on all allies, full revive with strengthen. So Python, which is free to play, was a fusion. Mithrala, free to play, get him from Hydra. Both are going to be top tier against the new Hellraiser boss. You could also use Nishak. Nishak has ridiculous bomb synergy with poisons, okay? So these are probably the champions I'm going to be utilizing. Most likely Mithrala, Pythion, Nishak, Arbiter, and Lydia Death Siren. And I feel like we'd be just fine with just those champions. Obviously, we're going to need a lot better gear in general, but I feel like we'll be just fine with this Hellraiser boss. He's not that difficult. Anyways, that's going to be it for this one, guys. Let me know in the comments down below, what other champions could you utilize for the Hellraiser boss? And consider subscribing to the channel. Really would appreciate that. It's going to help me out, and I would love to get on the test server at some point. But without any subscriptions, I can't get on the test server to bring you a lot better content in general. So thank you guys so much. Take care.